lovely class. I know that this week I've been asking you guys to look at your grammar, and I know that we've been going over some of the stuff that we've done earlier in the year, and I've been really pushing that you guys should be writing nice, strong sentences. And a lot of that has to do with this idea of, what is a sentence? What is a full sentence? Right? What makes a sentence a sentence? How is it different from things like a fragment? And in that, we have to look at a couple of specific grammar terms, because if you don't know them, it can be very difficult for, for you to understand why something is a fragment, why something isn't a sentence, how that affects, how you're writing and how you can make really strong sentences. Because going forward, if you can make a nice, strong sentence and, it's something that you have proficiency in, your writing will be beautiful, pretty much. Okay, so with all of that said, let's take a look at this idea of what a dependent clause is. I notice that, more than one of you guys are getting stuck on this idea of a dependent clause. Now, I think a lot of this has to do with that scary grammar term of a dependent clause. So when we're looking at dependent clauses, we're looking at essentially that idea of, again, what is a sentence and what is a fragment. Now, keep in mind, for those who, have moved on a little bit in grammar, have gotten to more complex, I'm going to be breaking this down as simply as I can. So I might oversimplify something or, try to describe it in very simple terms, and you might say, oh, hang on a second, there's a case when, this could be da-da-da-da-da-da. This could be correct if. You're probably right. Email me and ask me those questions. But I'm going to talk about, like 80 to 90% of the time. So, I'm not going to sort of right now address that 10% of the time, because if you can get this 80 to 90% down, and you have that solid understanding, we can move on to understand the more complex stuff. So I'm just kind of putting that out there as a disclaimer, that I'm going to be simplifying some of these terms. Okay, so when we're looking at this idea of a sentence and a fragment, a sentence is going to be more or less what is going to be called an independent clause, or it's going to be made up of an independent clause. Okay, and a fragment is going to be made up of a dependent clause. Again, this is about like the 80 to 90% of the time. There's going to be something missing that's going to make it not an entire phrase or not an entire sentence. So let's take a look into this idea of dependent clauses, because they're not always bad. And we'll kind of get into that. But first, what is a dependent clause? Okay, so a dependent clause can also be called a subordinate clause. Now, if the word subordinate clause is a little bit scary because it's a big word, you could stick to dependent. It is a phrase that cannot stand on its own as a sentence. Think about, if you, when you go to school, let's take this example. So you're going to school right there, right? And especially when you were really, really young. So let's think, like grade 1, grade 2. You're pretty young, and your parents probably don't want you around the kitchen so much. So you were dependent on your parent every single day to give you your lunchbox or to give you lunch money for the cafeteria. You needed them, right? You were dependent on them to provide you food. I hope this makes sense. So in the same way, a dependent clause, it needs its kind of parent. It needs its mama, right? In order to help it out with something. It's missing something. It's growing up. It's not quite there yet. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know how to use them properly. So, let's take a look at an example of a full sentence. So a full sentence would be kind of like, your mama or papa kind of character in the scene. I like to eat cheese. This is a full sentence. We have our subject, right? We want to have that idea of subject. So we have the who or the what. We have our verb. And then we kind of have the object or the rest of the sentence, kind of what is it that you like to eat, sorry. There we go. Like to eat. What is it that you like to eat? You like to eat cheese. I'll put a box around that. All right. So we kind of have all the components of a sentence there. It can stand on its own. Now, a dependent clause, or that subordinate clause, is going to have just a little bit extra, or a little bit added on to it. And I'll talk about these words in a second, but you'll see this word right here, now because. Now, I taught you guys at the beginning of the year that you can start a sentence with because, but there is a very specific way that you have to do it. Okay, so if you've ever been taught that you can't start a sentence with because, that was a lie. It was probably a time where your teacher was trying to simplify things for you to make you understand and have nice, strong sentences. But you can start a sentence with because. Just when we start a sentence with because, we're getting into that idea of dependent clauses. Now, you can't have a dependent clause on its own, otherwise this would be called a fragment of sorts, or not a sentence, really. I guess it's not so much a fragment, but it's not a full sentence because it is yummy. Now, again, we do have our subject, it. We do have our verb, yeah, is, and we do have kind of the description afterwards, that yumminess. But the because is sort of sticking on there, sort of like a little bit of an eyesore. Okay? Now, I can combine them together to make a full sentence. Okay, so if my full sentence is I like to eat cheese, and then my dependent clause, let's use orange, is because it is yummy, I can stick them together, right? Because we'll have our full kind of, in this analogy, we have our parent who's providing us that thing that we need, and then we have our, our little kid going off to school. Straw hat on him. Okay, so if you have the parent and the kid together, it works. It's a happy family. It only doesn't work when we have, the kid on his own. If we have just a little kid, right? If you see a little kid running around, you go, where's your mom? You're kind of curious about this. But you could have an adult standing by themselves at the mall eating their own lunch, and it's not a big deal. But if you see a little kid running around the mall, without a parent, you might ask a couple of questions. I hope this is sort of making sense. But the idea is you can't have a dependent clause on its own. You need to have an independent clause. Okay, confusing enough? Let's keep going, and I'm going to walk you through sort of a couple of more things, and then we'll take a look at some examples. Okay, so first and foremost, let's take a look at some example dependent clauses. So remember, these are the ones that cannot stand on their own. That's that little kid asking for his lunch money. Although it was a long walk, our first sentence right here. Now, this is a dependent clause. Again, we have our subject, we have our verb, and we have the rest of it, which, I'm hoping we might get into that kind of rest of it coming up soon, but for the most part, for right now, let's just call that the rest of it. And then we have this kind of just this little eyesore of the although, right? It doesn't really fit into anything of what we think of a sentence. Our second one right here, if we wanted to go, what is our subject of the sentence? We. What is our verb? To want and to go, so it's a nice long verb there. And we don't have any rest of the sentence, but that's okay. And then we have this kind of little eyesore right there, if. Okay, third sentence. Since it was raining, subject, it, verb, again, nice long verb, was raining. And what is the eyesore? Since. Alright, our last one right here. As the car was pulling into the driveway. So a bit of a longer one here. But same idea. So we have the car. What was the car doing? Was pulling. Right? Or pulling into. It's a phrasal verb. It's a bit strange. Don't worry too much about this right now. And then where was it pulling into? It was pulling into the driveway. And what's our eyesore? As. Okay, so I have lovingly called these eyesores. something that kind of hurts to look at, if you will, but they're not bad. So the name of these is a subordinating conjunction. Now, if you remember, we called these dependent clauses. We also had another name up there for them, subordinating clause. Okay, and a subordinating clause is going to start with a subordinating conjunction. Conjunction simply means that it is adding something, right? So we could say in our compound sentences, I like cheese and, and it is yummy. Okay, so for those who were in my class earlier in the year, that "and" right there is part of that fanboys analogy that we used. These are coordinating conjunctions. If this is confusing you because you missed that class, just kind of ignore this part. We're not into it right now. But I just want you to see that connection between that idea that it is adding something. We're adding sentence 1 to sentence 2. How do we do it? We do it with the "and," which kind of acts like glue. Same idea with these words right here. Now I chose some of the more, for the Twitter. I chose some of the more common ones, although this list is not complete because there are different kinds of dependent clauses. But I don't want to get too complex in telling you about all the different kinds. I want to break it down, and these are some of the more common ones that we'll see. Okay, so we have if, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, until, because. Now, if you see a sentence starting with one of these, okay, we know that we're starting with our subordinating clause or dependent clause. Again, it's not always necessarily wrong to do so. You can, but I want you to see the difference between the dependent clauses and the independent clauses in this video. Okay, I'm going to try to keep this one short. So if you see any of these words in there, you know that it is a dependent or subordinating clause. Okay, so let's see if you can tell the difference. So tell me if the following, this is why you should always edit your work. If the following 10 phrases are dependent clauses or full sentences, independent clauses. So you're telling me if they are a sentence or independent clause, or if it is our dependent clause. Okay, if you'd like to keep track, you can. It's going to be out of 10. But let's see how you do on these guys. Okay, so I'll read them off. I'll give you time to think about it. You can pause the video and then press play again when you're ready. And grab a pen and paper if you'd like, and you can even number your page. Keep track of them. Or if you want to simply watch through and do it verbally, that's fine. Let's have fun with this. Okay, let's try for number 1. We went to the mall. So you're going to tell me if this is independent. Is this the parent who has the lunch ready for their kid? Or is this dependent? Right? Ready? Independent. This doesn't have any of those subordinating conjunctions that we saw before in that nice long list, right? We have our subject, we have our verb, and we have our rest of our sentence. Okay? Now, if you know what all this rest of the sentence is, we haven't learned it yet, so I'm not going to get that complicated into it, but that's the rest of the sentence. The rest of the predicate. And I mean the rest of it because the verb is also included. Okay, either way, let's go on to number 2. So that was number 1. Number 2. Although I already had pants. So is this independent or dependent? Ready? This one is dependent. Okay, we have our subject, I, to have, and the rest of the sentence. Okay, and then we have our nice kind of subordinating clause here. I'll stop calling it an eyesore. All right, number 3. I needed new pants. Independent or dependent? Ready? Independent. We have our subject, we have our verb, we have the rest of the sentence. Okay, let's keep going. The more you do, the easier these become. Number 4, because I had a job interview. Is this independent or dependent? Ready? Dependent. Subject is I, to have, and then the rest of your sentence. Again, with our kind of subordinating clause right there. Now keep in mind, we'll get into that idea of how you start a sentence with because. I will get there, but for now, just know that is a dependent clause. Number 5. Until I ran out of money. Is this an independent or dependent clause? Ready? Dependent. Our subject is I, to run out of, and then the rest of our sentence. Again, subordinating conjunction right there. Ready for number 6? Number 6. If I was rich. Is this an independent or dependent clause? Look for the subject. Look for the verb. Is there anything in front of the subject? Ready? Dependent. I is the subject. To be is the verb, right? We're in past tense. I am, you are. I was, he was. Rest of your sentence. And our subordinating clause is if. All right, let's continue on to number 7. Number 7, I would buy all of the pants at the mall. Is this an independent or dependent clause? Look for your subject. Look for your verb. Is there anything before that? Ready? Independent. Okay, our subject I, to buy. This one's a little bit more complicated because we have that would right there. I'm not going to kind of get into the rest of the mechanics of this, but the would is not before the I. That's the important part right there. Our I is starting off the sentence. All right, number 8. When I wanted to go to the mall. Is this independent or dependent? Find your subject. Is there a word before it? Ready? Dependent. I is our subject. To want to go to the mall. Their subordinating conjunction being when. Okay? It's just leaving us still with questions. When I wanted to go to the mall, the dog showed up. When I wanted to go to the mall, the bus broke down. When I wanted to go to the mall, I went. Okay? We need some more information to make it a full kind of sentence. Okay, 2 more. As if I wanted to buy pink pants. Is this independent or dependent? Find your subject, find your verb. Ready? Dependent. Okay. I kind of combined 2 subordinating conjunctions with as and if. Okay, both of those are subordinating conjunctions. Subject's right there. All right, last one. Today was a good day. Is this independent or dependent? Find your verb. Find your subject. Ready? Independent. I know I've been using I a lot. This one's a little bit different. Today is our subject. And then to be, right? In our past tense was. Okay, how did you do out of 10? Did you get 8, 9, 10? If you're kind of getting up into here, you're really starting to understand that idea of what a dependent clause is. If you're a little bit lower, if you're getting that like 6, 7, 5, okay, maybe you'd like to have more of a review, let me know, and I can always make more review videos like this where I put out sentences and we walk through them. If you are kind of getting into this higher 8, 9, 10 range of knowing dependent and independent, let's take a look at this bonus one. Okay, so like I said before, you can combine independent and dependent clauses together. That is fine, and that makes what we call a complex sentence. Okay, so this is an example of what is called a complex sentence. It means that this has both independent and dependent. Now, I'm going to make independent yellow and dependent orange. I want you to go into the sentence and see if you can find which one is the independent and which one is the dependent. Now you can write them down. You can just hold them in your mind. Oops. Which one is the independent clause in the sentence? Okay, so there's a couple ways of doing this. I find that the easiest way for me, and it might not be for you, but that's okay. The easiest way for me is to take a look at that large list that we had above. Right, so if I go up to this list right here. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this is just going to be memorization. Do you know what these words are? As soon as you see them, they should kind of set off a little light bulb in your mind. Something is wrong. Not wrong, but something, that's a dependent clause and you should be aware of it. So if, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, until, because. Okay. If you'd like, you could pause the video here and write these down. This might help you with your work that I've given you this week. And let's take a look back down here and see if we can find any of these. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, can you find one of those subordinating conjunctions? Pause the video and try to find one of those subordinating conjunctions. Did you find one? Okay. I'm hoping that you found it, and it's right here because. Okay. One of the most common subordinating conjunction. It's one of the most frequently used ones. And it's great. I love it. It makes a beautiful complex sentence. It helps to explain your thinking. We just need to know how to use it correctly. And then once we kind of get that down pat, then everything will be great. Okay, so if I'm starting with because, now we know that for all the ones that I've been giving you, we've been putting because at the beginning of that dependent clause, which is how it's going to go most of the time. And then it's just going to continue on because I wanted to. Okay, that's our dependent clause. Our independent clause is the rest of it right here. I ended up buying 5 pairs of pants. I need to make this bigger. There we go. I ended up buying 5 pairs of pants because I wanted to. Okay, I hope this kind of cleared up a little bit about the idea of dependent clauses, and will get some of you guys unstuck in your weekly assignments that I've been seeing a couple of places being stuck. So, let me know if this helps. If you have more questions, let me know. You can email me. You can message me on Teams. You can write in the YouTube comments. I'm checking just about everywhere. But let me know if you're stuck. I'm happy to create these videos that you guys can kind of watch and learn from. If you'd like to have a private tutoring with me and you're one of my students, just message me on Teams and we'll set up a time and we can kind of go through a couple of these. Otherwise, I hope this helps. Have fun with your grammar this week. You guys are doing stellar. I'm looking at all your results. I think this is the only place people are getting a little bit stuck. But other than that, you guys are doing amazing. Keep it up. I know this isn't easy during this time, but honestly, I'm impressed with all the hard work you guys are doing. All right. So, again, let me know if there's anything you need, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!